Testing.
Council will call this meeting to order. For the record, it is December 2nd, 2025 at which clock? 4:32 p.m. We'll go with that one for the day. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilman Cavanagh. Councilwoman Little Roberts. Here. Councilman Taylor. Here. Councilman Overton. Here. Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next item up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I'll make a quick addition. I'd like to amend the agenda. We have the following items to our consent agenda. The item 26, Centerville subdivision number 2, water main easement number 1. Don't typically amend the agenda for a consent item, but this was a request, and maybe Mr. Neri, if you can speak to the request real quick and why we think it's appropriate to be added to the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you. Yes, this particular one came to our attention late. It is related to item number 3, the Centerville project. So there are 2 easements for this project, and they just need to get the final phase of it signed off on by the city engineer. And this somehow did not get added at the time, but it is related. It already has been reviewed. The project is ready to move forward. And we felt if it was all right with the council, we would go ahead and request it to be added tonight, that we can keep it moving.
Thank you for that explanation. Do I have a second to the request?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to add new item 26. Is that the right, to the agenda? Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is agreed to as amended. Next up is the consent agenda.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
with that, amending the agenda item, we approve the consent agenda as amended.
That's agreed.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. There are no items moved from the consent agenda, so we'll move on to our department reports, which is item 27, which is destination downtown discussion. And don't know who's gonna, looks like Chris is gonna come up to continue this conversation. Welcome, Chris.
New and improved mics, I hear. Think we're good? Yeah. We'll see. If anything dumb comes out of my mouth, I'm totally blaming the microphone and technology, so. Okay, Mayor, Council, it's good to see you. Hope everybody enjoyed their Thanksgiving and marshmallow sweet potatoes. I don't know why we eat that once a year, but we do. Appreciate you hanging in there and the invite back. So today, we're gonna talk about connectivity. We're gonna talk about streets and basically all things transportation. And I want to walk through several different things as we go through it with respect to the geography and also conceptual. And there's a big issue that I want to get through. It's towards the end, and I'll get through that as well as describe the subsequent white paper that will be accompanying this conversation that will make it across your desks probably just in the next few weeks as well. So with that, I'll jump in. I always do this wrong. Okay, so these are just the general concepts of and the agenda of what I would like to get through today. And as I mentioned, just some of the specific areas and themes, the geographic themes that you are all, I'm sure, very familiar with by now. And then this third street discussion. But let's start off with the purpose of connections. Why do we even care? What's the value of a connected street system? There are many. And we'll start with efficiencies. The bottom line is that when a street system is as close to a grid as we can get it, it's hyper efficient. It is why in areas where you have many more connections, there's much less pressure to widen because the congestion is spread out, right? And so when we only have a handful of major arterial roadways or even collector streets, much more pressure is put onto those individual streets. And so a grid system is as much as efficiency as you're going to get. Safety. This is something also that comes along with a grid system most typically. When a system is built and it's got many, many connections, the risks and the traffics, because it is sort of diluted, if you will, those risks decline. And very often the safety numbers back that up significantly. And then the graphic in the upper right, you can kind of see this is research done by one of the nation's leading researchers, Wes Marshall out of University of Colorado, who can talk a whole lot more about this stuff than I can. But the bottom line is when you have a system of cul-de-sacs and circuitous routes, that system is not nearly as safe as one that is well connected. So one of the other parts of it, and that doesn't go just for vehicular safety, by the way, that is for pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, all kinds of things. Modal opportunities, real simple. You're probably not going to walk if it takes you a heck of a lot of time and a long distance to do it. So when you have going back to high school geometry or, maybe even junior high for the overachievers in the crowd, the shortest distance between A and B is a straight line. And when you have more connections, those lines are shorter and therefore so too are the distances. And so it invites and encourages much more opportunities to do that, to walk, to bike, or other routes, even by driving. But when we have more connections, the lower right is an image. A company called Transpo Group had a product called Via City where they measured connectivities in a street system. And the bottom line is where you see in that image is blue is hyper efficient, where it's red is very, very low efficiency. And because of it, you see a change, and it's mostly exclusive driving trips versus others. Well, again, remember our whole thing is downtown, and it's trying to get people to get around in many ways as possible. Economic development, last thing too, is again, where we have commercial corridors and we have people and there's activity and you see people out and about, they want to set up businesses and they want to be a part of a downtown environment, specifically with regard to the downtown context. So all of these are some of those things that come along with connections. And then I guess I do need to hit on this last one, operational efficiency. I think this is something that would be of interest to you. Trash trucks, emergency service providers, snow plowing operations, even though you don't do that, right? But those types of things come with greater efficiencies when we have a gridded street system. The city of Moscow, for example, has measured this, and they've seen that specifically with their snow plowing operations and the cost savings in some neighborhoods versus others. So something that's also comes along with it. What people said. So when we went out and we talk with everybody in the different forums that we did, these are just some of the broad general comments that we got. We want to be able to get in and out easier. Okay, point taken, right? We want to be able to walk around, bike around a little bit more. We would love to be able to just park once in certain places anyway and not have to move around and move the car or, other things. And so that comes land use, but also certainly transportation. So these were, I guess you'd say, our North Star when it came to the concepts that we just talked about when it comes to a system, but also what the folks had to say. So I'm going to walk through. These are, again, more recommendations. The alignments are not meant to be exact or precise. In some instances, they are more conceptual. And again, all of these are in the document as you've seen, but recommendations going from north as I make my way towards the south. So starting at the top, probably is no surprise. You have one big, huge parcel left to be developed on that northwest corner. That's difficult to connect because the streets that are to the west don't really allow it. and even north-south. So what you can do is you can try to go east-west. You might be able to do like a horseshoe type of a road that goes back behind and then comes back and connects as much as possible. But you are limited in terms of what you can do connectivity-wise in that parcel. Bike ped improvements slated with respect to Fairview and Cherry. And then I will come back. There's one more little arrow you'll see there, that little connection that spans the Fairview section. I'll come back to that towards the end because that has a lot to do with the 3rd Street discussion. North Main District, as we've discussed, again, I'll hold off on the 3rd Street and the far right, but a couple things more specifically, and I'll explain some of these a little bit more detail in a moment. One of them being the 4th Street connection over there in the northwest, and then the possibility of another east-west connection, whether it's a street or whether it's a path, that is to be determined. But the right-of-way is there, and it does afford an opportunity to be able to make yet another east-west link that gives greater movement in this part of the downtown. And so those opportunities are there. And then the circles are the possibility and recommendations of pedestrian hybrid beacons, which in this instance is needed in terms of the importance of that tool versus some of those rapid flash beacons that you see. That's not the right tool for these corridors. You do have to bring traffic to a stop, given the number of lanes, the volume, the speed. It's important that we give that full pause versus just an advisory when it comes to a crosswalk. So again, I'll come back to the 3rd Street in a moment. I do want to show you this though. So many of you probably already know this, but this 4th Street connection that is in that upper northwest part, if I go back a graphic, it's there over by the left-hand side of the North Main District label. That's what it looks like. And that is a perfectly good street, but it does not function as a street. And it doesn't function as a street because there's 400 feet of missing roadway there. If you read the 2008 3rd Street document, the alignment study, which I will talk about a whole lot more momentarily, they talk about the importance of that corridor. And if you use this street synonymously with 3rd Street, the exact same rationale would apply. The only difference is that 4th Street doesn't go over the railroad and continue south. However, it does run parallel to the corridor, the main Meridian corridor, and services the neighborhood, accesses Cherry. We know there's a school in there and so forth. But this street, which could, in my opinion, my professional opinion, should operate more closely aligned to a collector level street, does not at all because of this particular section. To me, that's an opportunity to increase connectivity, to get some of those trips off the main Meridian couplet that don't necessarily need to be there, right? It does come in some documentation, you'll see with recommendations on speed management. So as you go into it, we shouldn't just, hey, here's a straightaway, go for it. There's ways to treat the entrance of that so that people are respective of the neighborhood. It doesn't prompt cut through traffic and that sort of thing, but an opportunity potentially there. As I continue, so what we know to be what we've been calling the Old Town area, lots of things there. Many in the bike ped realm, some of the connections east, west, and so forth. But the couple of things that I want to showcase are those yellow circles, which I'll show you momentarily, the red arrow that's there, what that looks like momentarily, and then the railroad corridor in a bit. So the yellow circle, I think I've alluded to this in the past, but the idea here is the potential of simple neighborhood traffic circles. I'm not talking about full-on roundabouts. Those can be consequential in terms of the design and size in the particular intersection. They do take up more volume. There's benefits, significant benefits, but I'm not talking about that. I am talking about a neighborhood traffic circle, and it's going to look like this in the upper right. So those kind of things, specifically the picture in the left, something modest like that. could take the place of four-way stops. Traffic circles and roundabouts are incredibly effective at safety. They reduce vehicle crashes considerably, especially higher speed ones and the like. Why this recommendation? Remember, our whole entire point is to do everything we could to make downtown Meridian pop out and stand out in any way that we possibly could. This particular approach is not done anywhere else in the valley, where you have a system of a handful of traffic circles in a residential area, more than just a one-off. Okay, the one on the upper right, that picture exists. It is more of that neighborhood traffic circle. It does exist. It's over in Boise. It's over off of Rose Hill, if you know it, but it's not done in numerous places. Bend, Oregon is a great example, but those are more full roundabouts, but they've done them in many places. So the idea here again is safety-based, motion or mobility-based, but also placemaking concepts. Make this area stand out, especially in the neighborhood. I've kind of talked about the pedestrian hybrid beacon, but there's an image there just for your reference, in case you're unfamiliar. But the other two things I want to point out, Taylor, and then this roadway or railroad underpass concept. So I'm going to go back just again for point of reference. Where's Taylor? Oh, there you go. So if you're not familiar, don't recall off the top of your head, it's that lower left L-shaped arrow. Part of it exists. In fact, the whole thing really does exist. However, if you look at those images, the one that's on the right, that's where it transitions from what is as complete of a Taylor section to where it starts to lose that completeness. And then it turns into essentially not quite a dirt road, it's paved, but it's mostly for the trucking operations and so forth. This isn't something that we're suggesting needs to happen tomorrow, but especially as redevelopment may occur, if it does occur, or if there's a desire again to enhance this connectivity, that street's there, that street's ready to go, but it needs that next level. It needs to be completed. And it does that. It does a lot of things in terms of the benefit for this particular part of Meridian and in downtown. With respect to the railroad and the possibility of an underpass, I know, that's a tough one. That's a heavy lift. I get it. However, here's the deal. As of right now, the only real way to cross those tracks is either through our Meridian main corridor, the couplet, or by the 3rd Street section. On the east side of the couplet, there's nothing to the west. So as things change, as things improve, as you see land use investment occurring, redevelopment occurring, there's going to be a demand, especially for people on foot, to be able to get across that railroad. But railroads are notoriously difficult to work with. And so we don't know what those future of that's going to look like. An overpass is also consequential, especially in cost. And when you get into the ADA requirements, you can see a 700-foot back-to-back, ramp system to cross 100 feet and 700 feet down. You're talking a quarter mile to cross 60 feet of track. But an underpass and a tunnel is also a challenge, admittedly, especially with the water table. So ultimately, what is that decision? Should it move forward? This is our recommendation, but if that's something that, changes over time, so be it. But if that 4th Street connection is made, and then you make this, now we're creating a corridor on the west side of the couplet in downtown that continues the same objectives that we see largely now on the east side. So that's where that came from. Let me get through this. Okay, the Speedway area, pretty straightforward, really. It's mostly in the world of bike ped, some of the sidewalk improvements, some PHB height connections, especially again, should the Speedway transition? Well, if it does and it becomes something that is desirable by foot walking, people stay, who knows what the future of that site, if it does change, or even if just the parking lot changes. What if it became a hotel? And people came specifically for the Speedway, but stayed in a hotel and they want to go eat right across that street, right? Are places to do that, but there might be a reason why a crossing ends up being warranted. So this is where some of that motivation comes into play. The last thing before I get into the 3rd Street discussion. So the Southern Gateway, again, you all have had this discussion, I think a couple of different times, and it's a challenging one. The internal section, that's going to be what it's going to be. That's going to be with whatever the developers wanting to do, whatever you all permit. But overall, big picture, that the water tower, Waltman, those sections are not complete just yet, need to be completed, need to be polished. It deserves to be that way. Other connections that we recommended be made, even if it's just by pathway, are north-south connections that do get from that path or from that parcel up north and south. The only one that might stick out to you is that dashed blue line that goes out towards the west. That street out towards that residential subdivision, and I thought I highlighted it. Guess I did not. I think I did it in the paper, but in any case, that's a stub street. So that residential subdivision that's out there to the west has an existing stubbed street that has every intention of being extended out towards the west or to the east. I will tell you, having measured that, if you were in this neighborhood and you wanted to get over towards, especially for example, just geographically, let's say the storage areas, to get there now, the connectivity, it takes almost 4 miles to go all the way around and connect back in. That is an immediate recipe for drive only, drive only, drive only. That's the only option we're likely giving people when we have connections like that. It's exactly why that recommendation is there, is that it helps in everything that we just discussed, right? So at some point, if this comes back before you, this is something that we would encourage to take a good hard look at.
Councilman Overton.
Chris.
Yep.
Just interrupt you on this one. This council, I'm not sure if everybody in this council was sitting here, but we've already pounded this section of our city once before and came up with a development that looked a lot like what you're presenting to us. It's not new when we look at it now. We approved it, although I think it's gone nowhere.
Right.
But it included 2 bridges to cover the areas that needed to be developed for connectivity to the north. It had the residential hookup that went to the west, which the people living to the west, even with the hookup, as you stated, would allow people to come straight across instead of having to go all the way up to Franklin. But we also had additional exits to the east on Corporate and a connection that made it out to Northwest 5th out to Franklin Road. So I'm assuming, the only thing, I don't want you to feel like you're trying to talk us into something that we actually as a council already approved.
Yep.
We thought it was a good idea the first time we heard it.
Yep. And Mr. Mayor and Councilman Overton, so remember that most of these things are coming from a place in time when the document was last touched, right? Which at this point was almost a year and a half ago. And when we were in the process of coming up with these was precisely when you all were dealing with that application. And so the timing of where we were in terms of recommendations, and then it was moving forward through you. And now here we are. And as you pointed out, and I think that's exactly why I'm still including this, because should that application die on the vine, and I think you might have a one-time extension. I don't recall off the top of my head your code exactly, but at some point, if they don't move dirt, it's going to die and it will come back in front of you. And so at least conceptually, this is sort of, I think, the netting under the high wire a little bit and saying, hey, this plan is still calling for, at the minimum, these connections. You want to go above and beyond, even better. So that's the timing of this, is just a little background there. So, okay, but point taken for sure. Okay, this is the beast. This is the beast. This is something that for me personally, professionally, has been in our radar from the beginning of this project. And the more we examine this, the more I felt it absolutely imperative to do a deep dive, have the discussions, and to present to you I think not only the findings, but I would even go so far as to suggest a recommendation. Let me give you the background, if you don't recall, the 3rd Street alignment. Number one, it came out of a 2008 study. I'm sure conceptually it was discussed much longer than before that, but at least there was an alignment study done in 2008 that formally looked at the corridor. What came out of it? Specifically, let me back up. What started, when you look at this graphic, were 2 alignments. The green line, 2.5 Street, with 2 curves, one heading towards the west, one coming back to the east before extending up the existing 3rd Street or whatever needed to be constructed up to Fairview. The other one that was in that original alignment study was 3rd Street in maroon. The 2 that are labeled 4A and 4B, resulted after public discussion. So once the consultant was in the midst of the project and people were talking about these ideas, those 2 came out of that as well. So just a little bit of background there. I will say this now, it's going to be repeated more and more, but why was the only alignment really either 3rd Street or what ultimately then came out of the 4B was because the assumption at the time was that that is where a full signal could be located. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that, but that's why this dashed line, the 2.5 Street all the way through, was not included in the 2008 alignment. And I literally just said assume signal at Fairview. Never looked at that. There were other assumptions here. One of the other major assumptions at the time, and who could blame them, was the presence of Coal Valley Christian, right? This was 2007, 2008. So it made a lot of sense. You know now, there's some question marks. We know, as far as we know, maybe you all know more, there is a desire for them to relocate their campus. When that happens exactly, that's to be determined, but the desire is there. That changes a lot of what the 2008 assumptions were, particularly the concerns about traffic flow and kids and kids maybe walking to school and that kind of a thing. But a lot of that is going to change at some point in time with the potential redevelopment of Coal Valley Christian. Let me see. I'm going to go back here. Okay, so this is not scheduled. The improvement or the alignment, the extension of 3rd Street is not in a plan right now. It is not funded, and it is not in ACHD's plans with respect to anything concrete. It is identified in the long-range CIP, and it does say this is where it's to go. However, it's a great big asterisk that says future consideration. Otherwise, it doesn't really exist except for the agreement that's been in place. That's different from the 3rd Street south of Carlton, which is in the 5-year work plan for pedestrian improvements all the way down to, I think it's Pine, or I'm sorry, Franklin. In the 2008 study, there's things that you need to understand, and if you're not familiar with it. One is that it looked at, again, these different alignments, all of which span the Coal Valley Christian field that exists today, okay? Beyond that, every one of the alignments requires the purchasing of private property, i.e. homes, and many of them are full takes. In other words, they're having to move. That house is going to be demolished, and that's what it's going to be, right? When we submit the white paper, you'll see how many units per alignment are in there, but each one of them is at least about a half dozen, some of them upwards of 12 or 13 homes are gone as a result of the alignment that was picked. Demolition, and as I mentioned, so in the lower right, those were the right-of-way estimate costs, and also in the white paper, you'll see the actual construction costs But we bumped those up using the escalators that we know of today. Just for the right-of-way alignment, we're at least almost 2.5. We're at close to 3. And I think those numbers, frankly, are even higher than that. I think because you remember, this is fair market. When you get into negotiation, that's a whole different deal. So it could very easily be 4 million or more just for the right-of-way acquisition, which you are paying for, because these are not eligible for impact fees. This road is a collector level road and therefore not eligible for impact fees. So if we have a
Mr.
question.
Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
Chris, just a clarification,
Yeah.
because you're right. This has been talked about longer than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
As different solutions have been presented. And the problem we've had is not necessarily this council, but previous councils, is we'd identify a best path forward. And then we did nothing to preserve the land.
Mhm.
And we allowed additional building to occur under some of these pathways. But just as a clarification, as we're looking at this, so it's clear to me,
Yeah.
when we look at the alignment for 2.5, we are not looking at just the simple alignment of Third Street to 2.5 going all the way to Fairview. We are looking at Third Street going to 2.5 and then 2.5 cutting back through the residential area to Third, as it's shown on here. So we're not talking about the yellow dotted line at all.
We're talking about both. So what I'm talking about is in the 2008 study, the green line that you see here was what was in the study. The yellow dash line was never considered. And it wasn't considered because at 2.5 in Fairview, there was never going to be a signal put there, at least in 2008. So I'm going to come back to that in just a second, however, because we had discussions with ACHD just a month ago, and their opinion in 2025 isn't what may have been in 2020 or 2008, which affects this decision. Does that answer the question?
Just a clarification.
Yes.
Councilman Overton.
When we're looking at the color code at the bottom.
Yes.
Those color code numbers do not include the yellow dotted line to Fairview.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Because it was never considered, because you were never going to get a signal there.
Right, right. So the alignment conceptually in our head would be a blending of partly this green line and the yellow dash line once it goes up towards the north, but not include the eastern swing that then goes back to Third Street. So what I'm introducing to you all tonight would essentially be a fifth alignment, if you will, which is partly the 2.5 that we did have analyzed in 2008, but not the dash portion of existing 2.5 street. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Chris, maybe this would help a
Yes.
little bit. You just, what I heard you say, all you did was escalate my inflation and basically, you have not taken into consideration any new development, any new thing else in the original green, red, purple, and blue number, so what's council's already approved up in 4B is not taking into consideration in
Yes,
the row estimate
right,
or anything else.
right.
And the yellow portion is not a reflection of 2.5, or the green is not a reflection of real cost of 2.5 to yellow in this context.
That's much more accurate. Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, all we did was take a look at what was in the 2008 study, the assumptions of the number of units, the full takes, all of that, because those numbers were clearly marked in the report and said, okay, if that moves forward, some of those structures we know are still there. Some of, there's been some changes here and there, but for the most part, it's still pretty much the same where it was in 2008 and just simply escalated that. But the dash line that you see here, north of just where that 2.5 street mark is, that label, there are no structures because the street is there. So the only right-of-way acquisition for what would be a new potential alignment would include the field, because you can't get away from that. So it still has to connect from Third, swinging out towards the west. And then one corner of that corner lot that is existing now on the opposite side of the field. I think that's Washington. Yeah, Washington and 2.5. So there's a little sliver there, but otherwise it's smooth sailing all the way to Fairview. Okay. I want to get into the assumptions because this is a critical component of this. When we met with ACHD and talked about this and said, the assumption has been for the better part of almost 20 years now, that Third and Fairview would be fully signalized. Their response to us was, nope, nope, it's not going to be signalized. And neither would 2.5, neither would Fourth, anything in there. They have no desire, and they are going to lean hard on traffic warrants to say it ain't happening. But the other thing they're leaning on very hard is their policy with respect to signal spacing on arterials. That's what's in front of you here. Okay, so because of Lake Street and because of Main Street, that space in between, they are wanting half-mile spacing on arterial roads, right? And so now when you split the difference between 2.5 and Third, 2.5 is only 550 feet or so. Third Street is only 830 feet from Main. So they're not interested in putting in a full signal there. They do have interest, however, in an alternative that I threw out to them, which I'll go over in just a second. However, I do want to point something out to be fully, I think, clear and objective about this. There are examples where this policy is not in place. And that's what that table in the lower right is showing. There are places throughout Ada County where there are arterial roadways where signal spacing is less than a half mile. So you should know that because it's part of a broader discussion potentially to say, wait a minute, that's not over here, not over here. And so that's a whole other part of it. But just to be objective about it, there are examples in other places. Okay, so I've already kind of said this, I think. Let me go back, that bottom one. So what are they open to? They are very interested in access management on whether it would be 2.5, whether it be Third Street, whatever it is. They're very interested in limiting turning movement on and off of Fairview for safety reasons. What they would be open to potentially is a refuge island on Fairview with 2.5 Street and a PHB, a pedestrian hybrid beacon, that spans it to get to the other side of Fairview. Because for them, their motivation is, okay, that gets us to the access management part of things, but also at least allows some degree of circulation, even if it's by foot or bike. It might not be all by vehicular, but it does allow the north-south component of things. So that's where they would be open. They didn't come right out and say, heck yeah, sign us up, but they did say we'd be open to that conversation. But signal, they're not aboard that train. So if that assumption were to move forward, that's what this graphic is showing. And so it's split in two because of the length of the corridor. But from the north, as you span towards the south, just thinking about what that whole corridor would look like. That's what this is trying to depict. You all have been leading the league in the Treasure Valley when it comes to lateral and irrigation canal pathways. And so I highly expect that to continue at the very north end of this and it be official. Now we have a starting point because now I can connect from there all the way to Story Park, which I misspelled in the bottom. Don't pay attention to that. I changed it. Someone had to be smart and they put that E in there and it messes me up every time. But now we have a full corridor, okay? And it goes from that pathway with the possibility of a PHB, as I just discussed on Fairview. You have the new gym going in. You have lots of redevelopment and development opportunity between the existing parcels, Coal Valley Christian. You span that field. In the white paper, you'll see also an advantage too that happens with that field, by the way, because likely, and again, I had this conversation with the district, if the 2.5 Street segment were to go forward, the existing 2.5 Street that's already there and been improved would be vacated because there's no need for it. That would then be absorbed potentially to the property owner, which makes that a more developable or redevelopable parcel. You go out to the west or the east rather, that changes that up. But that's in the white paper. And then some of the other things. This aligns with the Festival Street concepts. It's a half block away, right? And it takes you further down to the railroad crossing, which is a very important element of this discussion because it allows us to continue on north-south in a safe way, and there's very few railroad crossings. And then ultimately you get to the other end, which is the other PHB on Franklin that allows safe crossing of Franklin to get to the park. And all of that 3rd Street section between, I think it's from Carlton, again, all the way to Franklin, is scheduled in 3 years from now to be upgraded by ACHD with all of the bike ped infrastructure that's scheduled to go. So all of that comes with you not having to bulldoze a house, with you as the city of Meridian saving a lot of money that you probably have needs elsewhere for. And again, none of this would be impact fee eligible. So that's the overview. I just said all of this. Don't you hate it when you make these pretty cool things and then you just say it? I'm not going to get into all of this. This is in the document, and I'm sure it's going to be subject to change with any of the revisions that we do. But yes, there's some implementation components of it that provides at least some directive, generally speaking, on specific improvements, who might be responsible for what. But again, for the sake of time, I'll save you on that. So I wanted to hit on that 3rd Street because it's an important one. To me, it's worth maybe rehashing a bit because it's really ready to go. And I will add one thing too. When you go on to ACHD's website, last year's 5-year work plan is still on it, which can be very confusing, but in this case was helpful. Why? Because there was a project on that 5-year work plan that is no longer there. That project was a resurfacing and ADA ramp upgrade on 2.5 Street from Fairview all the way down to where essentially the improvements began to the south. That was on their schedule. But I'm sure because of budgets or whatever their decision-making was, that project not only was not just delayed, it was pulled out of the entire 5-year work plan, but it was on their radar, right? And so the only thing left would have been the sidewalk gaps, probably some stormwater considerations, but otherwise that same section with the dashed line would have been pretty much ready to rock. And then all that would have been left is the track section and the potential of the island and PHB at Fairview. And everything else is coming on down the pike. Okay. I'll be happy to stand for questions.
Councilman Overton.
Comment. Excellent job. I can't tell you how many times I've spoke on that in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Because should have been 2.5 to 3rd Street, 2.5 a long time ago. The reason it never happened, and Caleb, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was because we previous councils wanted to see a signal. And back in the day, if you go back 20 years and the traffic counts were low enough, it was still a possibility. But planning for today, you showed a lot of intersections down there where they don't follow the rule. Unfortunately, some of those intersections where they don't follow the rule are some they probably use as examples of why we don't do this.
Yeah, it's fair enough.
I understand and agree with the no signal at 2nd, 3rd, or the 4th. But it still would have allowed us and still can allow us with the least expensive option to take 3rd from Franklin all the way to 2.5 at Fairview, get people across. Anybody who spends any time at all when that school's in session at the end of the day and sees what that mess is coming on 2.5, coming on 3rd and coming up Carlton, it's pretty scary. It's a mess because that simply just because the roads don't align. There's a lot of things we could take care of by doing that. It's been talked about for an awful long time. And if the signal is off the table, I think it's a really good opportunity for this council moving forward to look at finally going ahead with a solution that would alleviate all of that. And I appreciate you guys doing such a good job bringing that in the dark.
I thank you. And just real quick, also, it's really important. I did not say this, I neglected. Your comp plan flat out calls for this. right? The Third Street section, the alignment, the parallel route to Main and Meridian, which it's not going to solve any congestion issues on Main and Meridian, but it will take some pressure off. And it does allow other mobility. One last thing I did not point out, and again, to your point, Councilman Overton, Third Street from Fairview going across, you're going right into the drive-through of Burger King. So if you want a Whopper, it's perfect. But if you want to go to the pathway that will eventually, I'm sure, be on the canal, that's where the 2.5 Street section takes you, and the right-of-way is already there. You go out and look at the utility corridor, and it's right on the right-hand side, which is a great indicator that it's ready to go to. So sorry about that.
No problem. Chris, and I do love me a good Whopper, so I don't want to disparage that.
Well, you're 200 feet over.
200 feet over. I guess and I'm not looking for an answer. I think it's just more of a comment in the larger scheme of things. It's like, I understand, ACHD's arterial street viewpoint and policy. I also understand that Front and Myrtle are state highways, and you've got signals every block. So I guess I would, in some part, I don't know if a light makes sense at 2.5 Street. I don't know if a light makes sense on 4th Street on the other side.
Yeah.
I understand the policies, I understand the reasons, but I guess I would say, I think that, when you're looking down the future, does this area need to have more stoplights? That just as a general rule, I don't know the answer to that, because I don't know how the downtown redevelops, and if, we become very successful. If 2.5 Street redevelops from Fairview all the way up to Coal Valley, a lot of that could just be like, boom, boom, something completely different.
Mhm.
A light may be very, very important to access at that location compared to the way you currently get across at Main Street. So I guess just from a conceptual standpoint, I'm open to whatever makes sense long-term, irregardless of ACHD policies. Even though this is a main arterial, it's also the entering into our downtown area. And maybe we want people to go 25 miles per hour through several lights and have several different left-hand turn movements through here. But the Burger King doesn't make sense. But honestly, if you look at redevelopment opportunities, where 2.5 Street comes into that other property, frankly, it could be part of a larger redevelopment of the entire Albertsons and everything in between long-term.
Yep.
And so it may be the perfect place to have a full access if you want to do something different than the current, I'm going to say it, kind of coming out of the Albertsons thing up that hill with we can do a lot better of an access point on the north side of Fairview than that one. And so it might be a better long-term location with the left-hand turn movements only compared to a north-south connection through that area. So I just don't want to throw out things because they're not in ACHD's policy if they're not in the best transportation interests of this area as it redevelops. So.
Well said, and my only response to that is that I don't disagree with that at all. And I think that this buys you time, because as of right now, they're not even close to a warrant that would get them closer to that. There are exceptions in their policy manual that can, and on our white paper, you'll see this. I didn't hit them here because I didn't want to hit you with everything, but they do have some exceptions on the distance of signals. Some of them you meet, not all of them. And so I agree that if this goes through, which can go way faster than waiting for Third Street to come up with millions and millions and millions and kick people out of their homes to get to a warrant. So you might be right, Mayor. It could very well be where that gets built and then it does trigger that. And now there's a different discussion that could be made, 100%.
Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
Chris, excuse me, really great presentation, probably one of the more thought-provoking, kind of interesting and sort of taking a holistic view about what we want to see. Just a couple of really quick questions. On the corner of Carlton and 2.5, there's that little house on the corner, then there's the mobile class
Oh, maybe find it.
trailers. Yeah, if you want to pull up.
Oh, I lost the presentation. I don't know what happened. Probably me.
Well, it's the field across from the school.
Yep.
Would we need to move that home that's on the corner, or would it be route kind of through the field and around it?
So let me make sure I understand what you're asking for, Councilman Chambers. So let me see if I can pull this up real quick, because I think there's two different ways I think you're going with this. Hold on just a second. I'm trying to get the best angle. It's probably gonna be, I thought you were going to say that Taylor Avenue ought to be named after you.
Well, we can do that too.
For sure, that was where you're going with that.
Yeah, right.
Okay, that works. So there, with respect to the field, as we speak, there are 5 structures. 4 of them, I believe, are portables.
Yeah.
So they can be technically moved. I'd probably sell them, I would imagine, but that's their decision. So fortunately, you don't have to go bulldozing them in that respect. Then there is the other structure, which I don't remember what it is, but it's certainly affiliated with the school on the very corner. Well, when they move, then it's not in the way exactly. I think it can go around it if the redevelopment were to occur and they would want to keep that for some reason. But that structure, I don't think would be a problem, at least being in the way, and the city wouldn't have to buy it.
Okay.
The opposite side, where that green line comes into that one corner, that's the only one, but it's not a full take. It is probably taking some, prize azaleas or something like that, but that's one corner quadrant of a lot that would have to be, but that's very different than an entire multifamily unit that would have to go away, and a lot of other things, and homes that are on the other side of the track that are right in the middle of it.
Mr. Mayor, just a quick follow-up.
Councilman Taylor.
So yeah, the reason I asked the question, and keep this slide up, please. So let me start with options 4A and 4B. Those I don't think would work anymore because
Yeah.
2.5 years ago, the council approved a development with that trailer park there, where they're actually going to they're required to extend 3rd Street down into that kind of open vacant lot now, but there's a brand new development that's going to go there. So there would be no reason why that is even a logical reason to have that. Extending 3rd Street through there again, 3rd Street's going to be extended already and be improved from Fairview to about Bradley there, but then it stops. And so you would have all that from Bradley to through Washington with all the homes there that you'd have to figure out what to do. 2.5 Street, if 2.5 Street, including the yellow dotted line, was your connection, and then it came over, very few, actually almost no purchasing of full lots and demolition. So you can imagine if we're buying homes to demolish them like that, we're talking years and years and years of actually just getting in millions of dollars. If we're looking at trying to have something that seems tangible that we could do, I like your suggestion of 2.5 Street, the yellow dotted line, and then just kind of at the very, very bottom, that how it kind of swoops back over to 3rd Street. Clearly seems like a very reasonable recommendation that is the most cost efficient and the one that's closest to us on the time horizon of actually being able to get it done. So I did want to kind of point out and remind council of the development that we have there. So the option 4A and 4B just, I don't think are very good options at all. So I appreciate that. And I'll just kind of finish with this, Mr. Mayor, real quick question. When it comes to the other side of Meridian Road on the west side, that little 4th Street connection, I haven't actually been there. I didn't even realize it was there, a few hundred feet of lacking a connection. But was 4th Street, that connection all the way, yeah, right there. Who owns that land? Is that right away already owned by ACHD, or is that private land?
My understanding, and you all might know, or maybe even Caleb's still here? Yeah. I believe that's actually still privately held. I don't think that is in the public right of way. If it was, I would imagine it would have been done. But my understanding, unless I'm wrong, was that sliver is owned by a private entity.
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Taylor, council members, Chris isn't wrong. There is right of way actually that is whole through there, but there is one property owner that owns essentially a spite strip that prevents the entire width of the right of way from building the road. So there's one property owner that owns half of the road, if you will, or what would be half of the road today.
Okay. So you can walk through it, and I think you can maybe even off-road it through there, but it's not a functional street. And if I can, real quick too, going back to the other piece, I would imagine that given that the 2.5 street, the resurfacing and the curb ramp project was in there, it was supposed to go to design this year, and then be built in 2 years from now. It's still floating out there. If it was of interest to the city, it wouldn't shock me if it was an ask of the city, and if you all said, hey, we can do the curb or the sidewalk gap fills potentially to bring that back in and get it delivered sooner. That's just my opinion, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was something that could happen, if it was of interest to the council.
So I know our good friends at Coal Valley are watching online tonight, this conversation. I did reach out to them and share with them what I thought would be, I didn't know what you were exactly going to be presenting, but just other conversations. They did reply back that their preferred choice would actually be 4A and 4B, not knowing that there was approved development already in that location. But I guess, what I shared with them, that there would be no decisions made tonight about the future of this road. But I guess I'd ask you, Chris, the question as you continue to do some work, and what is the public conversation as you see it, both from what you're going to be doing in the city before a decision would be made about if to leave the current 3rd Street alignment?
My professional opinion after hearing from hundreds of Meridian residents, they would prefer you not to spend probably $8 to $10 million on that roadway and have to take homes in order to do it. That this is a city that prides itself on the fiscal management of tax money, tax dollars. And if there's another way of getting what is ultimately really the same exact thing, there's really no major difference here in terms of the resulting project. I would be stunned if that was a differing opinion. Based on what I've heard and based on what I know of Meridian, having spent a lot of time out here for the last 4 years and getting to know everybody. With respect to the Coal Valley folks who are watching, again, as I mentioned, Mayor, in our white paper, I break down what the parcel would look like on all 3 of those particular alignments after the fact, and what the advantages and disadvantages would be. And what you see, again, with the green line, I'll just walk you through this real quick. That sliver in the southwest and the existing 2.5 street, as per ACHD, that road would be vacated because there's no need for it to go through anymore. And that sliver could all be consolidated to the existing school property, increasing its footprint, making it more valuable. The opposite side of the road would still have 3 acres of developable land that would be flanked by 3 streets. That's very enticing, and the shape of that lot is still usable. If you go to the 3rd Street section, and I do the same thing, and I just bifurcate it. Well, now that section to the west, there's no need for the district to vacate 2.5 street. Because now I've got 2 streets, this one's just off center, that's not a guarantee. So now I've got this funky little sliver that would be between 2.5 and 3rd Street that's not all that developable. It still could be, but not as developable as the alternative. And now I have this section to the east, which still would be developable, but it's now starting to take a different shape, and your setback law, or setback in your zone now starts to change what could happen there, just because of the geometry and parking and all of that. 4th is the one that's the most challenging because what is left, especially to the east, that little corner doesn't have a road to the east. It only would have the 4th Street and then Carlton, which makes it pretty problematic. Plus the shape of it makes it very difficult to develop. So for what that's worth.
Sorry, maybe my question wasn't clear. What's the public process you see moving forward? Is it going to be done through your white paper? Or once your white paper is done, is that when the city should go talk to the people where this would impact along this corridor? If the council wants to look at an alternative, that's,
Okay, sorry about
are
that.
you doing it or are we doing it after you do a paper? That's kind of the question. And is your paper going to talk to the existing landowners in that area to get their feedback and input? Or again, is that a separate process?
Okay, great question. So let me clarify. So our white paper didn't include public outreach. It was conceptual, it was technical, it was an analysis document. So that will be presented to you. In the 2008 alignment study, I noted that the MDC as well as the city were both on that, as well as ACHD. However, I would assume that this is something that the city would, if there's a desire to change it, this is the agreement that would have to occur between the city and ACHD. But with the urban renewal district, there's certainly the opportunity with respect to funding, the potential for some degree of infrastructure, whole other discussion. But that's, I think, how that relationship would work. I think for you all, it would have to be I don't know if it would result in a change of the comp plan. Okay, so you would have to have a comp plan amendment to identify that. And then with respect to ACHD, it's on their maps and stuff like that. But again, nothing's funded. And frankly, when I had the conversation with them, honestly, they were puzzled as to what the importance of this was. It was the beginning of the conversation. And like, why is this important? And I'm like, well, because again, it backs up and parallels the couplet and goes into residential and all the reasons that you know. But that's the process as far as I know. And if you wanted to do public involvement, that's another discussion to go out and to canvass, the community and get feedback. And I think you'd also want to make sure to truly get a better feel of exactly what Coal Valley's thinking, because that is important part of the discussion.
And Caleb answered that we would need to have a public process to make this change. And that's really where I was trying to get to. If you deliver a white paper next week and council says, yes, we want this, it's not that
Right.
component. Okay. Thank you. Only one other quick question. You know the going rate for an overpass or an underpass of this magnitude? I mean, is one twice as much as the other? And
I can't give you a price on an underpass because of the unknowns with, the water table and the geotechnical stuff and all of that kind of stuff. But I will tell you that overpasses nowadays over a span like that, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw a price tag of about 20 million or more. It wouldn't shock me at all. We talk about this people think surface at grade pedestrian crossings. They're like, oh, why not just do an overpass? Yes, because they can be tens of millions of dollars and are really great straight shade structures. A lot of people just like, forget it, I'm not gonna do it. And at street level anyway.
okay. All right. Just trying to get a little perspective. So, okay. Ashley, Caleb, Dave, Sean, anything else from you all at this point? Mr. Hood?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just real quickly, I wanted to update you all that the Meridian Transportation Commission did discuss this pretty briefly yesterday. I didn't give them a whole lot I certainly didn't give them Chris's presentation because we didn't go into that much detail, but I did at least put it before them and gave them some of the background from 2007-08 and when this was adopted in 2009. And they seemed generally appreciative, but they're like, I don't know what you're asking because we don't have updated information, so the white paper. So I guess I'm here just to tell you they're at the ready if you want them to be involved in anything moving forward. If there's a reevaluation, they kind of said, let's see, it's not ready for prime time was one of the comments because they didn't feel comfortable with having all the information and sending a recommendation to you if you want to do that. But I'm just here again to let you know that if you want them to be part of this reevaluation, look at new data, white papers, those types of things, they're available. So
And I would just offer, I'd be happy to come out and talk with them if you'd like me to, and just kind of walk through this.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Share.
thank you for the presentation. I think having the white paper will be really helpful,
Yep.
just because I think it'll be a little more detailed. It'll kind of lay
Mhm.
everything out. I would be a proponent of, having the Transportation Commission take a look at it once that's all ready for them.
Sure.
Could
Yeah,
hurt
makes
to get
sense.
their Input.
That's why you have them, right? They're a sounding board for transportation decisions. So yeah.
Excellent.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
maybe if I can just, as we're wrapping up here, just make a couple of comments and observations and sort of kind of where this whole series of conversations is going. We've been breaking down the destination downtown plan in sort of more digestible topics. I think we're really close to almost being done with that. I think we might have a couple more that we need to do beginning of next year to sort of finish out sort of the topical ones. And then after that as well, Councilwoman Strader kind of mentioned this in the last one, in terms of the feedback for MDC. And it opened up to a little bit of some thoughts here, and Councilman Kavner and I visited a little bit before the meeting, but at some point we need to sort of pull our feedback and ideas together as actual feedback. I know they've listened to some of our comments and our concerns, but we all have different comments and concerns to mention. So at some point, we need to start figuring out how we're going to funnel some of those comments and look at them as sort of a package as a council to say, here's some of our feedback that we want to give to MDC to incorporate whatever changes may or may not be approved by MDC as they're working on finalizing that. I'm not sure exactly how we want to dictate how that would look like. I'm obviously happy to be helpful in facilitating any of that discussion, but just wanted to kind of getting that feedback to MDC for their consideration. I think we're going to get close where we want to be able to do that as council. So Councilman Kavanaugh, I don't know if you had any other thoughts about how that process would look like.
Mr. Mayor. if I may.
Councilman Kavner.
I think council, it's important for us. I've really appreciated the dialogue, Chris, and I think council's asked some good questions and recognize some of that feedback has come from just a particular council member who offered that feedback. And that may be Luke's particular feelings, but the rest of the council may not agree. I can appreciate how challenging that might be. Like, how do we decipher all of that? So what I would like is, I do think there's a couple of additional topics. I also think it's important for us to probably go back and maybe revisit, or at least close the loop on parking, maybe finish how we started. And then from there, I would encourage all of us, over maybe the next month, let's think about how we want to provide that feedback, whether it's sometimes with like budgetary decisions, we've all just, here's the question, council takes a vote, we move forward. If it is, hey, we're open to kind of letting staff determine, or we want to weigh in here, but we don't want to weigh in on that. I just think, start thinking about how you want to best provide that feedback to MDC, because the goal was not to have a series of presentations, but they are looking for some action. I think we've committed to some action. What that is, I think that remains to be seen. But rather than us trying to figure that out a month from now or 2 months from now, we've got a little bit of a lower agenda this month. Spend some of that bonus time thinking about how you think is best for us to provide that, and then we can reassess with that maybe in January or February.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Have a good Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, Chris, Ashley, team. Thanks. Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Kavner.
I know we've got an executive session on the agenda. We'll try and get through. We've got a short timeline, but if not, we'll continue it after our main meeting. So, Mr. Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pursuant to Idaho State Code 74-2061A.
Second?
Have a motion, a second to go into executive session. Is there discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries. We'll go into executive session. Council, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
move we come out of executive session.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to come out of executive session. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Hey,
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we are out of executive session.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
we adjourn our work session.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Hey.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We are adjourned. Council will call this meeting to order. For the record, it is December 2nd, 2025 at 6:01 PM. We'll begin tonight's regular city council meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts. Councilman Taylor. Councilman Overton. Councilman Whitlock. Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next item is Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I do not see our community invocation here this evening, so we'll move on to adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
only change that I'm gonna make is, we took care of our business in our executive session after our work session. So I move we remove the executive session on our agenda, and with that, I move that we adopt the agenda as amended.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted as amended. Mr. Clerk, anyone signed up under public forum?
Mr. Mayor, no one signed up.
Okay, then with that, we'll move on to item 1, which is resolution number 25-2547. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title. Read this resolution by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a resolution establishing the appointment of Helen Muscolo to seat 3 of the Meridian Parks and Recreation Commission and providing an effective date.
Council, as normal process, sat down and did interviews for this opening on our Parks and Recreation Commission, along with the commission president, Dom Gelsomino, and had a great dialogue, met some great people interested in serving our community. And Helen rose to the top of the list for actually some very unique things, and it goes very much in line with some of the conversations that we've been having about our Parks and Recreation Department. Helen actually comes from a professional background of being a vendor in parks. And so I think she has a very unique perspective on how to operate, even the financial ability and what might be expected by people doing business in our parks. So it seemed to be a kind of a match made in heaven from the ability to bring that conversation into our Parks and Recreation Department, as we do talk about how we try to find ways to hit our revenue needs to provide great programming and recreational opportunities in our park. But she is also bocce ball advocate. She has some very strong opinions about maybe some improvements that we could see to our bocce playing facilities here in our community. But loves the fact that we actually have, space to do that in Meridian. But she also has a family member who you may recognize the last name, a family member who's already serving on one of our commissions. So we know that the service level is high within this family. And so it's with that bring you Helen Muscolo to serve in this capacity, and be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock.
no questions, but thank you for vetting good candidates and bringing good names forward for approval. And with that, I would move that we approve resolution number 25-2547, appointing Helen Muscola to seat 3 of the Meridian Parks and Recreation Commission.
Have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 25-2547. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Strader.
just that I got to know Helen a little bit. I'm door knocking in my last campaign and have gotten to know her, and I just think she'll be excellent in that role.
Thank you. Okay. If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the resolution is agreed to. With that, we'll move on to department reports. Again, turn this over to Chief Ambassador Chea to do the introduction of new police department captain Sean. I'm gonna have to work on this one. I'll let the chief say the name so I don't butcher it on the record.
Mayor Simison, city members of city council. Thank you for allowing me to introduce our newest member of my command staff, Sean Sopowaga. I may have chosen him just because his name may confuse people more than mine, so it takes a little bit of pressure off of me. So that's one plus for him. But Sean brings extensive experience to policing, and over the last several years, I've had the opportunity to interact with him on a whole variety of different settings and have come to really admire him. He's earned my respect. He is a very strongly family-oriented man, and he's earned my trust as well. And so when it came time to select the latest captain, it's difficult to go outside of the organization, and this is the first time that we've done that. But Sean and I had been in discussions as far back as early March, discussing the possibility of him coming over in this role. Had numerous conversations with him, had the other two captains, Captain Stokes and Captain Leslie, meet with him as well over the last several months, and we came to a very clear consensus that while it's difficult to go outside of your organization, I was not looking to just fill a role. I was looking for the right leader at the right time who wanted to do it for the right reasons. And that's exactly who Sean is. He has shown from the very beginning patience, for one. Like I say, we've been talking since March. Wasn't calling me, hounding me. I was the one initiating those conversations over the months. He was very, very patient. But over that time, he showed a deep desire to really drive our mission forward at the Meridian Police Department and showed a desire to make us better. And, I trust him completely. His integrity, dedication, and his team-first approach make him the ideal choice for this position. And that's why I'm extremely excited to introduce Sean to all of you. And with that, I will stand for any questions, or better yet, have Sean come up and you can ask him any questions you might have.
Thank you, Chief. Sean, before we release the dogs on you, any comments you'd like to make?
Mr. Mayor, council members, that's the nicest things he's ever said about me. And I've known him for 4 years, so thank you, Chief. No, I'm just truly excited to be here. This is obviously, anyone you ask around here in the Valley, they know that this is a unique opportunity. Going outside for a command position, and I do believe I'm the right person. I do believe I'm the right fit for this position. And I'm just truly grateful for the opportunity to be here and for you guys taking the time for this introduction. I look forward to meeting with you and partnering with you on public safety issues you have. And once again, just thankful for the opportunity to be here, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, council. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
first question. Could you please pronounce your last name for us?
Yes, it's Sopoaga.
Thank you. Many, many years ago, somebody pronounced the chief's name for me and told me that's how it was, and it was not even. I wanted to make sure I heard it directly from you.
Thank you, sir.
Just secondary comment, I put a lot of weight in the words and beliefs of our chief. I've known him a long time, and I'm very proud to see you as a new member of our department. It is no small thing. I can't remember the last time we've ever brought an outside person into our command staff. And that says a lot for you and what you've done in your career. And welcome to Meridian.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Little Roberts.
Mr. Mayor, Council, and Captain Sopowaga.
Yes.
You introduced yourself as Sean, so, but again, welcome. I had the privilege of meeting you on your very first day, and just to watch the chief and the team and yourself go through the whole process was just, we know we've got the right person in the right position, and just welcome. Thank you for joining the team.
Thank you very much.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you soon. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 3, which is updated holiday policy and procedure 4.1. I have this down as Director Hoops.
Mayor, council members, I'd like to discuss and answer any questions on the updated holiday policy. So what drove a lot of this is just clarifying the policy. And I can kind of go through it. I think it was sent out to council members a few weeks ago and just talk about changes and kind of the reasoning behind it, if that would be helpful. So the first thing we changed was the holiday policy doesn't list the holidays. Those are on the intranet, which most employees use. We still have 11 holidays that are provided to the employees. And then holiday policy or holidays falling on the employee's day off. The current policy says the employee has to take it on the designated holiday or during the same week. The updated policy says if it falls on an employee's day off, so if we've got people that are on 410s, they can choose a different day during that same week to take that day off. Before, they had to have director approval to do that. So if you had a director that didn't approve that extra day off, then you wouldn't get those 11 holidays that were given to you by policy. So it creates a fairness issue and addresses that. The weekend holiday observance, there's no change there. If it falls on a Saturday, it's taken the preceding Friday. If it falls on a Sunday, then it's taken the following Monday. And holiday policy or holiday pay for full-time employees. Most employees receive 8 hours of holiday pay. A bulk of our employees are on 5/8. Employees that have a shift or a compressed schedule, so 410s, they receive 10 hours of holiday pay. And so that just calls that out in the, excuse me, in the policy. Excuse me. So all employees receive whatever their scheduled shift is. And then working on the current holiday pay plus straight time for hours worked. We've updated that and they receive time and a half for hours worked on the actual holiday. The premium only applies for hours physically worked on the holiday itself. Part-time and temporary employees, there was no change. They are paid only for the hours worked. Leave status rules, so there's no change there. It just clarifies it. Employees on an unpaid status before or after the holiday don't receive the holiday pay. You have to be on vacation or using sick leave. And then for fire, there's no change. That's governed by the CLA. So there are no changes to the number of holidays. The policy is clearer and easier to understand. Major improvements with it is 1.5 time premium pay for hours worked on the actual holiday. And that the reason behind that is it supports fairness and alignment with industry standards. So when we were looking at the holiday policy, we pulled other holiday policies from other cities, counties to review to make sure we were in alignment with what that policy should reflect. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Debbie. Council, any questions? Councilman Overton.
Hi.
Thank you. Part of what you've just done is you've gone back in a policy that we had over 20 years ago, where people that were working as 24/7 shifts in the city were able to take those holidays as they worked within their schedule. And I appreciate seeing that come back in a long time. Yes. One additional question, and you might have hit on it or touched on it, and just a technical question about where shifts fall on that 24-hour period. If an officer's a day shift officer on a holiday, of course, that 10-hour would be on a holiday. They're working at swing or at graveyard. And they've got either 2 hours or they've got several hours that are rolling over into another day that may not be the holiday. How is that being addressed in our time card system?
So with the, yeah, Mayor Simpson, Councilmember Overton, with the workday process, and FLSA standards, right? It says that if you work 2 hours on the holiday, that's holiday pay. And if you work 8 hours on the non-holiday, then that's what you would be paid for.
Mayor, just to clarify.
Councilman Overton.
So if I've got a graveyard officer working on Christmas Eve, Christmas Eve's not the holiday. They don't get
Correct.
any of that overtime for the Christmas Eve. Once it hits midnight, they're now getting holiday pay.
That is correct.
And if that's the last day of their week, they're only getting holiday pay for 7 of their 10 hours. They're not getting 10 hours of holiday pay. Can you walk me through how that works?
So with workday, it's actual hours worked on the holiday. So that is correct. If they split the shift, then they would get some non-holiday pay and some holiday pay.
Okay.
Does that
Yeah,
answer your question?
I'm getting more confused. So if they're getting 7 hours of holiday pay, where do they get the other 3 hours of holiday pay to complete the holiday? Do you understand? what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If you're telling me that they get to have that holiday at a certain point in time, but because it's falling across 2 different days, they're only getting paid for the holiday time at one time, are we making sure that they're getting their complete holiday time?
Am I off, Todd?
Well, I was just see if I help you here.
Yes, please.
If I understand, Mayor, Council, I believe the holiday is separate from the overtime. So let's separate the two.
Okay.
So the overtime that you were explaining is if they work 3 hours on Christmas Eve, that's 3 hours at the regular rate and then 7 at the overtime. That would be the overtime calculation. The holiday is completely different. Holiday will be 10 hours on their holiday pay, which is completely different than overtime calc and holiday pays that paid at regular time. That hasn't changed. So I think we're mixing the two there, the overtime, no problem. So the overtime is hours worked on the actual holiday, on the day itself. Holiday will still be 10 hours straight up. Everyone gets a 10 or whatever that shift is, if that helps. I thought I heard you kind of cross the two.
That we did.
Mr. Mayor, I probably used the wrong terminology. You're right, between OT and holiday time. So I'm just, it was such a simple process. When once before, they worked that shift and it went over into the holiday and they got
Yeah.
holiday time and they got the overtime. And now, I don't know, is it a software issue that's causing it? Because when you say it's FLSA, got to remember, I know FLSA backwards and forwards, and we get to interpret as a city how FLSA is used within the city. And that doesn't, we can't blame a computer software program for interpreting FLSA. That's something we as a city get to establish.
You're 100% correct. Compensation above and beyond what is regulated by the federal, you're correct. We get to decide that. And I believe we decided to not go with shift-based work. We went with hours-based work. That is a shift, or that is a transition from the previous. You are accurate with that statement, John.
And I do think we crossed the overtime into the holiday pay. Everybody gets 11 holidays.
And this will not be the last issue. I mean, Todd just sent me an email like within the last little bit. Daylight savings time is now going to be a different issue because you work longer on one day of the year and you work shorter on the other day of the year. So it's going to be hours worked. Workday, solving all of our problems, one thing at a time.
Mayor Simpson and council members, that is 100% correct. And I think most employers view it as you work an hour extra and then you work an hour less and it all comes out in the wash. But actually, we can't guarantee that somebody works the same shift on the same day. And so by federal rules, we have to account for if they worked an hour more, they get paid for that. And if they work an hour less, it's actual hours worked. So.
Mr. Mayor, I can't help it. I've got to ask another question then. So if we're going to go with actual hours worked, if we get to a point that we've got a shift work employee in the city. And it's the shift of daylight savings time where you lose an hour. If they request that day off, are they only requesting to use 9 hours?
I'm going to say yes. Because the shift would be 9 hours, not 10.
I've dealt with this for
Yeah.
so many decades now. I just want to make sure that we're pre-thinking and looking down the road for all of these potholes before we step in them.
Yeah. Mayor Simison, Councilmember Overton, this actually came in as a complaint through our complaint line. Somebody brought this issue forward because they had been shorted an hour. And so when we looked into it, that's actually how you're supposed to operate, a best practice, industry standard. So yeah, but next we will deal with the vacation time or the sick leave time. You're correct.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Scher.
I appreciate the effort. I think moving toward actual hours worked and kind of the accuracy that's coming from Workday is going to be very helpful to us. I know there are some growing pains as we're finding these issues come up, but I think overall these changes are positive. I appreciate your effort on it.
Mayor Simpson, thank you. Councilmember Strader.
Council, any additional questions on this item? Debbie, this would come back in subsequent weeks. All right. Then with that, we'll move on to item 4, which is updated overtime compensation policy and procedure 3.6.
Mayor Simison, council members. So again, the purpose of this policy is to address clarity throughout the policy and create fairness and to call out some provisions for police and their overtime and being kind of a unique work group. So we wanted to modernize and reorganize the policy for clarity so it's easier for the employees and the supervisors to read. It creates, so section number 1 creates a clearer structure and organization. The old policy was narrative and harder to understand. The new one allows an easier read for, like I said, the supervisors who need to be able to implement the overtime policy. Exempt employees, that section was clarification only. There was no change to eligibility. People are exempt or non-exempt from overtime. And it updated the terminology and aligns better with FLSA standards. Section number 3, non-exempt overtime rules remain mostly the same. Overtime employees or non-exempt employees still receive 1.5 times their pay for the hours worked over 40 hours. Overtime still requires advance approval from the supervisor before the hours can be worked. Police specific language that dealt with court time was pulled out of that section, and we created a new dedicated section for police overtime. The old policy only addressed court time. The new policy documents key categories such as supervisor directed overtime when a supervisor holds somebody over. Special assignments, minimum staffing so that we don't go understaffed, and then court time is also included in that. And this should improve transparency, consistency, and operational adjustment. In fire, there's no change there. They're ruled by the CLA. Compensatory time, city doesn't allow it. There was no change on that. We still, although employees have asked if that's a possibility, at this point, that's not something that is on the table. So hours worked and overtime period definitions. Only actual hours worked count toward overtime. Paid leave doesn't count toward overtime thresholds. Work week schedules, options clarified and formatted for readability. The overall summary, there were no reduction in the employees' eligibility for compensation. We did call out police specific, like I said, for the court overtime, supervisor directed overtime and special assignments. And so with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions, or Chief, any additional comments you'd like to make on this one? Okay,
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
My only question is, I, obviously, like, the way we've been doing things is not the way we're gonna do things going forward, and there's kind of a new approach now to, I think, be more accurate. Is there a communication plan for PD specifically to make sure everyone is aware of how to record their time now more accurately with some of these changes?
Mayor Simonson, Councilmember Strader, we have communicated and been working with supervisors, and with Workday, we have the ability to kind of craft it to fit our needs. And so as we've implemented changes, that communication goes out to supervisors at the police department as well as across the city. We are also looking to put together some training. I think we're lacking in that area in support of supervisors and how to negotiate, navigate Workday. And it's been a big change for everybody. And so we'll continue that as things change. The Workday we have today probably isn't going to be the same one. There are a lot of components to it that we haven't had time to really implement and look at. It's a huge program. It's got a lot of built-in great programs and things that we can do to help city and the employees.
Council, any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Well, this one will come back built at the same time. Is that the intention? They'll both come back? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, switching gears. Next item up is item 5, which is a request from William Kerwin for a connection to city water and sewer systems outside city limits at 3150 North Black Cat Road. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this request is, excuse me, request by Mr. Weir for connection to water and sewer outside of annexation into the city. We get these occasionally. And this one has been facilitated by the road widening project that ACHD is doing on Ustick that also impacts Black Cat. And in the process of widening that road, they're going to wipe out his septic system. And so they're going to, ACHD is going to pay for the connections and hookups for water and sewer for Mr. Weir. And he is eligible for annexation, so he has agreed to go through the annexation process. This agreement essentially allows him to get connection to water and sewer while he goes through that process, because he's renting the house out, and they want to be able to keep the people that are renting that whole. And so that's really what this is about. He's going to annex into the city. He's going to become a part of the city, but this gives him the opportunity to get connections until that can actually go through the process. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Council, any questions?
Sure.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Thanks, and I appreciate the clarification. I couldn't quite tell from the memo if he was the owner or was the renter, so it's good to know that he's the owner. Talk to me about he intends, what's the timeline in terms of beginning that annexation process? The council will take action tonight as this individual began that process to request annexation. Does that happen tomorrow? Does it happen? I honestly don't know. That usually the timeline is stipulated in the agreement. I didn't look at that really closely to determine when that timeline was, but that's usually in the agreement. Got 180 days to make that happen. Mr. Mayor, follow up.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Mr. Stewart, if 180 days comes and goes and the annexation, does the annexation process to begin or to be complete? Well, that's a good question. I just saw the number. I think it's to begin. Mr. Mayor, just follow up at the 180-day mark. By that point, we've probably made the connections. What happens if this individual does not begin the annexation process? I do believe that the agreement also stipulates that if they fail or they don't follow through with the agreement, that we can shut their water off. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Stuart. I appreciate it.
Council, additional questions? So are you looking for action this evening, or will it come back in the form of an agreement?
I think he's already signed this agreement, which you have, so we just are looking for permission to have you sign the agreement and it'll be done.
Okay, so you are looking for a motion.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor,
there's no further discussion and moving it along. I'd make a motion that we have the mayor sign the agreement with Mr. William Kerwin for a connection to the city water and sewer systems outside the city limits at 3150 North Black Cat Road.
Second.
have a motion and a second to give me permission to sign the agreement. Is there any discussion? If not, in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the item is agreed to. Stuart, next item is 6, Sewer Trunk Line Cooperative Development Agreement with Toll Brothers.
Yeah, so as the council memo or the memo that I included in the packet talks about, back in June, I came and visited with the city council about an opportunity to enter into a public-private agreement along with Toll Brothers for the construction of a section of the McDermott Trunk Sewer. And this agreement would give us as a city the opportunity to construct that piece at half the cost that it would normally cost us to do it. We had planned to do it in 2028. Toll Brothers would like to advance that. They're willing to pay the full amount of the cost of construction with the understanding that the city will reimburse them 50% of that cost. So essentially 50% of whatever the construction cost is. They also know, it's in the agreement, that that's based on a future decision by a council member and that you guys can't obligate that. They're willing to take that risk. And so we have worked as a city staff, and by city staff, I mean mostly Kurt and Keith and myself, with Toll Brothers to develop this agreement. They have actually signed the agreement. And I'm here in front of you tonight to essentially answer any questions that you have, but also looking for the same thing. If you are okay with the agreement, okay with moving forward, we're looking for that decision so that we can get this agreement signed. Back in June, you gave us till the 8th of January, I believe it is, to get the agreement signed. That was part of the conditions of approval that came along with the 2 Toll Brothers developments that they brought through. So we're trying to make sure, we know that there's not a lot of council meetings between now and then, so we have brought this before you, and I'm here to stand for any questions, but we are seeking a decision.
Thank you. Ooh, we're going to go to the liaison first, Councilman Taylor.
Thank you. Warren, you mentioned this in June when we talked about it. I don't know that I heard you say it tonight. I just want to clarify that this is also in the agreement. We'll be reimbursing them on the same sort of fiscal year plan that we had when we were planning originally to pay for it ourselves. Is that correct? So 50% of the cost, but be paying it not all at once, but be paying it over a few years as kind of in our CFP projections. Is that?
That is correct. We essentially had planned to build this section of the sewer line in 2028. So for this segment of the sewer, we will reimburse them in 2028. So we won't be advancing any funding for this project until then. So our rate models and everything else that we have shown are still accurate. We're not going to be, in fact, they're going to actually end up a little better because there'll be about $3.5 million less money that we'll be spending.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
I reviewed the cooperative development agreement. One of the things I wanted to make sure is clear, though, is that at least my reading of it, there is no cap. So it's based on actual costs, but it's not as if there is a cap in place. So we anticipate saving money, right? Like we think that the private sector will do it cheaper. We also anticipate that by doing it sooner, we'll save money, which is logical. It seems like costs go up over time, but there is no cap in that agreement that I have found. So I just want people to understand that the agreement, at least the way that I read it, does obligate us if the costs go up. At least I didn't see somewhere a carve out sort of for future councils. I'm looking at it like if we sign this, at least from some perspective, we're obligated. regardless of where the actual cost ends up. Am I incorrect, or do you want to set me straight on that? Just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Strader, there's two pieces in the agreement that exist. One, it gives us an off-ramp. There's a portion of it that talks about the estimate. So there's a construction cost estimate that Toll Brother has prepared in working with some contractors to get an estimate for the cost. We do have an off-ramp if the actual cost or bid amounts come in higher than that amount, and I believe it's 10%. If it's 10% higher than that estimate, which we have included in the agreement, we have the option to bail out. So we can bail out at that time if we don't like the number. Secondly, there's a piece in there, a component in there that says we will pay no more than 5% change order costs. That's 5% of the cost of construction. So essentially, we have an opportunity to bail once it's bid. If we don't like that number, if it's more than 10% different than the estimate. And we also have a cap on change order value on that project.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Strader.
I did see the cap on change orders, but it wasn't clear to me that, at least I didn't see that there was an overall cap. So I guess if, just to repeat back what I just heard from you, so the off-ramp would be at the time that the bids are received. That's kind of our chance, right? Really to get out of it. And what will be the process in terms of monitoring that? And will that come before the council as kind of like, if there is a differential between what we expect and what we see, is that going to come before the council to weigh in, or how would that off-ramp be used?
I'd have to defer probably to Kurt for the actual, what the agreement allows, but I would anticipate yes. In other words, I think even if the bid came in over 10%, we would come to the council and say, per our agreement, we don't have to do this. But it's 11% over. Do you still want to get into this agreement or not? So I would think, yes, we're going to bring this back and have a conversation with you, but I don't know, Kurt. Yeah, Kurt can probably, he's the primary architect, so, of the agreement.
That's a lot of responsibility right there.
Good job.
Good evening, Mayor Simonson, members of council. I think Warren described that well, and I can maybe elaborate on that from the first question as well that Councilmember Strader indicated. But the way the agreement is structured today, if the bid exceeds a certain value, the city has the ability to terminate the contract, but it's not required to do so. So there could be a scenario where it's slightly in excess of the figure that's contained in the agreement, and the council may choose to proceed regardless because that's still a good value for the city, but you're not required to do so. So if it exceeds the benchmark number, we'll be back in front of the city council to disclose that and get your direction. Do you want to terminate the agreement, or would you prefer to proceed? And the council will make that decision, and either way, we're contractually allowed to do so. With regard to the cap question, I think Warren described that well. I'm not sure I can add much more to that, but I would say that really there's really two aspects of the cost to the city that don't really have a cap. I think Councilmember Strader, you described the structure of the contract accurately. So the first sort of milestone is Toll Brothers will receive bids, and our staff will work closely with Toll Brothers and be at the bid opening to monitor that process. It'll be done all according to Idaho state law. It's all sealed bids and above board. When the bids come in, that's our first opportunity, and we talked about that. If the bids come in above a certain number, that's an opportunity to terminate. Then we have the protection to the city that says any change orders beyond 5%, that is 100% Toll Brothers responsibility. The city pays none of that. So the project costs are defined as the original bid amount plus up to a 5% change orders plural. And anything above that is 100% on Toll Brothers, 0% on the city. So the city's well protected there. That really leaves only two other categories that that have some financial costs to the city, and they're both somewhat, in a relative sense, more minor. The first is with regard to some geotechnical work that's consulting work that's built into the contract. There's no cap on that number, but the number is not great in this as a percent of the total project. I don't have that at my fingertips, but we're talking about, if you recall, maybe $200,000 or less. And then the second aspect that I recall from, that doesn't have a cap, but again, it's somewhat a small number relative to the total project cost. So geotechnical and health.
Construction staking.
Construction staking and inspections that they'll need, that Toll Brothers would have. So really, the amounts that don't have a cap either directly or indirectly associated with it are relatively small in this, in the overall scheme of the project. But I think the city has very strong protections relative to the actual construction cost and potential change orders. The protections in the contract really do favor the city quite well, in my opinion. So I think we're in a good place there. Happy to answer more questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
And so one thing I wanted to understand was, yeah, let's say, and I don't know if, do we know if the underlying contracts between Toll Brothers and the contractors doing the work, are those going to be like guaranteed maximum price contracts, or is there a potential that we could get in a situation where you have something outside of a change order? Like, let's say that materials go up and because of some changes resulting from the geotechnical work, the reality is that their contract passes through to Toll Brothers an increased cost in some way because it's not a GMP. Is there a risk to the city because of time or materials increasing or something coming out of the geotechnical work that we're going to have to eat increased costs outside of a change order? That was something else I was trying to understand.
Let me do it. I think you want to address it.
Once you start, I'll.
And you got a third phone a friend back there who's stood up.
Yeah, Keith can probably speak to this too, but I think the bottom line is any change that would happen would ultimately end up as a change order. So yes, they could have, petroleum prices could go sky high and pipe costs could go way up. And they could do some sort of effort for force majeure. If we thought that was legitimate, it would still be part of a change order. That's how the contract changes.
So my question would be, do we approve change orders? Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mayor Simpson, Councilman Strader, typically I do approve the change orders. We'll review them. This would be something I review with Warren, and any type of a material increase, I'm pretty firm on. We have a firm fixed price agreement. So the bid amount is the bid amount. That's the contract amount. They would have to prove something on, in my opinion, my liability or something that was totally way off base before they move forward with a change order.
And the change order.
I can't guarantee it's not going to happen, but it would be something out of the ordinary.
So maybe I think that you've done what you can to do the protection, but you're not getting to the base question. So I guess I would ask this, would there be opposition to putting a thou shalt not exceed whatever numbers currently projected in our CFP as a bottom line? We will never pay more than that amount under any circumstance for this contract, just to bring clarity. I still think we're going to be 50% of what that number is, but is there a reason not to include that for any reason?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple of thoughts. One is the short answer is no. No, there's no prohibition or anything that would preclude that from happening. I know that Toll Brothers is anxious to proceed, so it will result in a bit of a delay to the contract, but that's
1 week?
Assuming Toll Brothers is amenable to it. They do have a corporate, Toll Brothers is a nationwide corporation, so they have some structure to it in terms of their attorneys on the East Coast and others. So I think it can be done. It may take a little time, maybe more than 1 week, but we'll try to get as quick as if we can. I would secondly say what you alluded to, which is if we, for example, put a not to exceed figure of what our CIP shows, that number relative to what the city is likely going to spend there's a vast difference because we're paying 50% on the dollar, not $1 on the dollar. So I don't know that it has a whole lot of value other than gives us gives the city council, I guess, an assurance that we know we'll never pay more than what's in the city's current CIP. But I think that's the reality of the situation regardless. I don't think we may not need that language, but I guess if that's desirable, we can accomplish that. And the third thing I'll mention is we do have a representative from Toll Brothers here today. They're Idaho project manager. So she may have some thoughts for you on that that idea or any other questions you have for Toll Brothers, we do have representation here tonight, and I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any questions that she's able to do. So.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman,
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Kurt, correct me if I'm wrong, and you've said it a couple of times, we have a non-appropriation clause too in this contract. So if for some reason come FY 28, when we are going to appropriate the money and all of these safeguards that we think we have covered ourselves fail in some way, the city council at the time could say, we're not going to approve this appropriation and not approve it and not pay for any of it. And that's the risk that they're taking on today. So, I mean, your backstop is ultimately that city council can say, we're not paying for this. We thought we had all this safe in place. It didn't work right. We're not agreeable to this. The costs went up beyond it. We didn't catch every little nuance. We're not going to pay for it, period. And you can do that. So you do have a backstop in the future. And unless I'm mistaken, but that's what I had understood from our discussions previously as well.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I agree with that 100%. So it does have, this, which is a leap of faith for Toll Brothers. So we have an explicit non-appropriation clause that's required for legal reasons. Otherwise, the contract would be considered debt under the Idaho Constitution and it'd be illegal without a vote of the people. So we explicitly have language that says, this council cannot bind a future council in 2028 to spend whatever that number is. And that's a risk that Toll Brothers is willing to take. Now, I know we are all, we're a city of our word and we are people of our word. And it's our intent to honor our contractual agreements. And I know I know I can speak for the mayor and the council to that respect as well. So, we certainly don't intend to use that as an evasive mechanism, but yeah, at the end of the day, we certainly do have that protection. The non-appropriation clause allows the council that's sitting here in 2028 to make that decision.
Yeah, Warren just reminded me as well, we actually do have a cap and we come back as a change order and it's already in it. The change orders are capped at 5%. So if they had an increase, it would still be capped at that 5%.
Councilman Schrader.
So yeah, help me understand that. How does the cap work with change orders then? Is it based on the global change orders calculated as a whole or it?
Correct. So
Or the project.
Right.
Yeah, it's 5% of the value of that work.
Right.
So I was also going to shed a little bit of light. My typical process, I kind of view this similar to an ACHD project where we're not bidding it, it's somebody else doing that. When that bid comes in, I will put it on the consent agenda, typically come back and just state, here's the amount from the bid results are here. I'll give you the bid results, ask for permission to issue the purchase order for that dollar amount to Toll Brothers. That gives them the approval right there. That's the number that the 5% is tied to.
Mr. Mayor,
Where'd that knows?
that came from me. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
So I wanted to try and clarify and address Councilwoman Strader's concern. Any change to the contract is solidified through change order. So I think what you're thinking, well, there could be other things outside of a change order. Well, no, everything ultimately ends up being a change to the contract. So let's just say for the kicks and giggles, the contract amount, the bid price was $1 million. Based on the agreement that we have, the change order values are capped at 5% of $1 million. The city will never pay more than that. So even if they have a whole plethora of reasons why their costs go up, our cost is capped at 5% of $1 million. And they're responsible for the balance.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
And but we're not party to that contract with the underlying contractor, correct?
No.
Right.
Yeah, their costs could escalate from the contractor to them.
Certainly.
We don't have an agreement with them. We have an agreement with Toll Brothers that says 5% of that contract value is the maximum cap that you can request change orders for.
Yeah, no, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, I understand. I think what I'm getting at is just having looked at a lot of those types of construction contracts, because they are all so different and because we're not a party to them, I just wanted to ensure that there's not the potential for those underlying costs to get passed through to us from a practical perspective. For example, we're halfway through the project. We find that there have been change orders. We're trying to calculate it. And from a practical perspective, it's not really, you see what I'm saying?
So, Mr. Mayor, Council Administrator, to provide some comfort in that regard. So two things. One is both relate to one another, but the contract that's before you today that is between Toll Brothers and the city, and you're correct, the city is not and will not be a party to the construction contract between Toll Brothers and whoever the successful bidder is. We're not a party to that agreement. But our agreement with Toll Brothers gives us the authority and to review and approve that contract. And so we review and approve it before they issue it. And number one, and then related to that is they've already given us some months ago, quite frankly, but have given us their standard contract. And we've already looked at it and saw no concerns of that nature. Now, it's been a while since I looked at it, so I'm reluctant to kind of jump into detail, but we have seen the contract, and then per our agreement with Toll Brothers, if you choose to approve it, we get to review the final contract and say yay or nay. You know, we can't be unreasonable or capricious about that, but we have the ability to review and sign off on their contract just as to form, so it doesn't have any provisions that might be detrimental to the city. So we've seen their standard contract that they use, and there's no concern. We did not see any concerns of that nature.
Okay.
You had a question way back when, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor and Council Administrator, about whether they have a guaranteed maximum price. I think they do have a contract of that nature, or maybe some verbiage to that effect. I wonder, with the mayor's permission, may we invite the representative from Toll Brothers up to speak to that? They might. Would you mind?
Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Hannah Assurance with Toll Brothers. To speak to our contract language, we don't have a maximum amount. It's dictated by our bids, and then we put that into our contract. I'll speak back to change orders of the nature of say unit prices went up, or pipe went up or anything like that. We do typically hold in our contract them to a year worth of pricing. And then obviously if it's something like we went through with COVID, with prices going up, we try to work with our contractors when we can. So we do have some things in our contract, but we don't have a maximum price per se that's dictated by the bids.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, with your permission, sometimes we use different terminology in government versus private sector. So sometimes we'll use, and Keith will help us with the terminology even in the government sector, but I think what you said is that you don't go into the project with a maximum price, but once you have bids, that is the contract price.
Yes.
And any change from that point going forward is done by change order.
Change order, yes.
And you would agree that those change orders per the proposed agreement are subject to a 5% cap relative to the city.
Per the agreement.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that helpful?
Thank
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
this has nothing to do with the money. Just a curious question, and it may be nothing, but when we heard this and approved it, and I thought it was a fantastic idea that Toll Brothers would step forward 2 years ahead of our schedule, we approved 2 projects. Those 2 projects are hinged to this being completed. Do we have to do anything special with any other projects that come in that are going to be attached to the completion of this project that is not handled by our city as part of their conditions of approval?
That's already come up. I think, and I'd have to, that's kind of a community development decision. I think the way they're handling it now is they're basically saying, we can't approve you, can't move you forward because you don't have access to sewer until this project's done. They're not in the driver's seat. In other words, we can't approve them because their connection to sewer is not in their control. It is with Toll Brothers in this situation. So they're in a little bit different situation. Once the sewer lines are complete, then absolutely, they'll probably come to you guys and other developments will and seek approval for whatever projects they want to do. But I think right now, what I understood talking with Caleb is that they're basically telling others that want to, come in at this point, you have to wait until that sewer is done because we can't approve you because you're not in the driver's seat.
Council, any additional questions, comments, motions?
Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
No, I think this is a great discussion, and I remember when we had it originally in June, a lot of ensuring that not just the city was protected, but that Toll Brothers understood the risks that they were undertaking, and I think as a council, we appreciate them sort of stepping up. This is a great way for us to save money for the taxpayers. I think it's a great agreement. And I'll say I love attorneys, but I've never met an attorney that would encourage me to do something risky. I feel like we're on pretty solid ground here with what we have, but I do appreciate the discussion on making sure that taxpayers are being protected, the city is being protected. So with that, I would offer a motion that we approve the sewer trunk line cooperative development agreement with Toll Brothers for the construction of a portion of the McDermott sewer trunk line.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agreement for item 6 regarding the sewer trunk line cooperative agreement development with Toll Brothers. Is there discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The item is agreed to.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much for a lot of hard work on that one. So appreciate it. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 7 tonight, which is a public hearing for proposed 2026 shelter fees for the Meridian Parks and Recreation Department. We will open this public hearing with comments from, and we could come up with a good name, but we'll just call you Mr. White. So.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thanks for having me tonight. These are the shelter fees and the park fees that we discussed a few weeks ago. And between now and then I had shoulder surgery, so it's been about a little over almost a month, really, since we discussed this. But just kind of a quick recap that we discussed about a month ago was these park fees and shelter fees were last updated in 2018. Between 18 and now, the CPI says the inflation rate's close to 29 to 30%. So that's our proposal, was to raise them 30%. And we had some good dialogue there with that. And then that was the shelter fees were proposed 30%. The park fees were more based on a cost recovery, the cost recovery philosophy that we have based on what it is. And so really with that, I'll stand for questions if you guys have them.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Okay, see no questions. This is a public hearing. Ms. Quirk, you want to sign up on this item?
Mr. Mayor, there was nobody that signed up.
Okay, is there anybody present who would like to provide testimony on this item as they work on their school assignments and want to talk about parks or anything else? Or if you're online, you can use the raise your hand feature. Seeing no one jumping up and down to provide testimony, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock.
I move we close the public hearing, agenda item number 7 for proposed 2026 shelter fees for Meridian Parks and Recreation Department.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The public hearing is closed. Next item up is item 8, which is resolution number 25-2550.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock.
move that we approve agenda item number 8, resolution number 25-2550, a resolution adopting the 2026 shelter fees of the Meridian Parks and Recreation Department, authorizing the Meridian Parks and Recreation Department to collect such fees and providing an effective date.
I have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 25-2550. Is there any discussion? Do we need a roll call on this one, Mr. Neri?
Yes.
If not, clerk, call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh. Little Roberts. Taylor. Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lefty.
Okay. Council, anything under future meeting topics or a motion to adjourn?
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
so we adjourn our meeting.
Second.
Motion is second to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.
Right on target.
Is that